I hope it doesn't sound arrogant when I say that I am the greatest man in the world.
House of the Dragon time again. So there are going to be spoilers. We open up and the king is dead. So again, the important, pivotal moment happens off camera. I've been talking a lot about Amazon's The Rings of Power and how did I put it in a nice way, seems to borrow scenes from Game of Thrones. But this episode is a bit of a strange one for Hot D. The king is dead and the episode has a lot of political manoeuvring in the middle of the night. People making their moves before the news gets out, and it bears a strong resemblance to King Robert's death in season 1 of Thrones, and I'm not sure how I feel about that. On one hand, I did like that story a lot. On the other hand, this story is maybe a bit derivative of it. But on the good, I suppose some things do cycle in life, over and over again. The death of a king and a disagreement about the succession. There have been love and sex scenes in many other things. That doesn't mean that no one can ever do one of those again, I suppose. There's something about the energy of the way they've done it in Hot D. It's like they've tried to recapture the spirit of those scenes from season 1 of Thrones. At the start of the episode, we have about a minute and a half of empty rooms and corridors and a blonde child silently walking through them with music. And no, don't copy that bit. Don't copy season 8, please. No more slow walking like Tyrion in season 8 of Thrones. If you're going to copy something, can you copy maybe Sahara Nights nude scenes? Esme Bianco naked?
Come on, give me something.
As an aside, why do censors have such weird priorities? Because in this season of Hot D alone, we've seen a man's tongue cut off with a red hot knife, a man's head bisected at the mouth, several men's faces and heads caved in. But sex? Oh no, be careful with that. We'll ban you if you show that. What? Also, no penises. Even less so if it's a hard penis. Show torture by all means, just no erect penises. Okay, here we have the Kurt Russell film Bone Tomahawk. There's a scene in it where a man gets cut in half quite slowly while alive with a blunt axe chopping him from groin to neck. Is that okay? Yes. That's acceptable. Yes, it is. But no boners. No, that would be unacceptable. And what sense does any of that make? Sex is a perfectly normal part of life. None of us would be here without it. But we live in a world where in TV and film it's more acceptable to show a woman being penetrated through the chest with a sword without her consent than it is to show a woman being penetrated with a penis with her consent. And if anything, penis becomes even less acceptable on TV if she enjoys it. And this is done supposedly in the service of protecting young minds. This is to stop people from growing up with unhealthy attitudes, apparently. I'm maybe going to have to press the X to doubt button on that one. Do we have any data to back that up? Because I'd expect the opposite. So what are the high and low points of this episode? Well, they showed a lot more of King's Landing, and I've been asking for that. And that was great. It was nice to get out of the Red Keep funds. The series is focused far too much on the nobility for me. The world still feels very small compared to Thrones. So yes, this episode gets outside of the Red Keep, but on the flip side, it still never leaves King's Landing. Also in the bad, there were no nice scenes with sexy naked ladies. Now, I mean that as a joke, kind of, because this has become a bit of a bugbear for me in Hot D. So what exactly do I mean by that? I mean the show seems to want to show me things that I don't want to see. And when there is something that I do want to see, the show hides it or does it off camera. Because in Game of Thrones, when Esme Bianco turned up with her knockers out, that wasn't something going in that I knew I wanted to see, but I was not unhappy that it happened. And if anything, afterwards, I find that I didn't resent it. Whereas in contrast, House of the Dragon insists on making me see things that I don't want to. Maybe I'm not the audience that they were looking for, but I didn't need to see Matt Smith thrusting. I didn't need to see a close-up of Matt Smith's arse. And more than that, in this episode, I did not need to know that the character of Laris Clubfoot Strong has a foot fetish. I didn't need to know that. And I didn't need to see him with his hand in his underwear, vigorously rubbing himself off while looking at Queen Alicent's feet. Jon Snow going down an Ygritte in a cave? Fine. I can imagine some couples had enormous fun after watching that. That scene with Laris has gone in a much more, how can I put it, speciality direction. It's a lot less mainstream and more like the subject of a Sahara Night film. I shouldn't laugh. I find her film titles funny for the shock value alone, but I wonder how she feels about it. Because she did 22 porn films in 2005 alone. I wonder if she had to do it for the money. Did she enjoy it? Did she have a choice? I wonder how she feels about being in Game of Thrones. Did she want to be an actress and just ended up in porn? She'd be very interesting to talk to. I wonder how she feels in retrospect about her film role in Chloroformed Assassin. I also wonder how the actress Sophia Nonvete feels about her role as Captain Hey-Ho in the children's TV game show Swashbuckle now that she's in the Rings of Power.
Milk! Keep the jug still! Look, not a drop spilled! Oops! This doesn't look right! Turn that frown upside down! Only a clown would chuck in everything he found!
I wonder if in retrospect they both find their past roles humiliating. And looking at that footage, many of Sahara's films, curiously I guess, have a similar aesthetic outcome. So that's my criticism. Please, Hot D, can you show me things that I want to see? Things that are entertaining, like this sword fight between Kristen Cole and Sir Eric. Jesus, look at the cuts. Why are you focusing on Aemond wrestling with Aegon? I want to see the sword fight. Just, you do it every time. You show me things that I don't want to see. And you don't show me things that I do want to see. Also, I don't want you to cut away in the middle of the sword fight and show me Laris finishing himself off or a teenage prince spunking out of a window. Just compare and contrast that sword fight from Hot D to this sword fight from the 2020 South Korean film The Swordsman. Do you see what I mean? Do you see the difference? And the whole Kristen versus Eric fight would have been so much better if it had had any build-up. You needed to show that Sir Eric was formidable before the fight. It sells the fight. It raises the excitement for the clash. But as it was just Sir Kristen, who we know is a good fighter, fighting some guy called Eric. So Hot D, why can you not do a fight scene like that? Why can you not get whoever choreographed that fight scene?
Could you make me a cup of tea, please, Stephanie?
So, House the Dragon episode 9. And where was I with this episode? I did part 1 so long ago now that I can barely even remember what was happening. So allow me to do a quick refresher. The King Viserys had died in the middle of the night and people were walking slowly through dark corridors to sombre music. So it's dark, depressing, with sombre music. It rarely stands in contrast to the brightness and happiness of the rest of the show. I mean, seriously, I've listened to blues music that's more upbeat than this series. Go and find some Muddy Waters and tell me it isn't more upbeat than this. Maybe Mannish Boy. God, that song's good. Or maybe Smokestack Lightning by Howlin' Wolf. When the series Reacher opened up with that, that was an instant plus for me. I may review that series at some point. After quite a lot of crying, Alicent goes to her father to tell him about the king, naming Aegon as heir before his death. And between them, they want to keep things quiet so they can move before the information gets out. The servants are locked in the cells, and Princess Rhaenys, who's still in the city, is locked in her room until they can find out whose side she's on. There's a council meeting called, and the council are told about the king's death and the king naming Aegon as heir. The council already has a plan. It appears they've been plotting behind Alicent's back about what to do upon the king's death. Lord Beesbury is not at all happy at the plotting. He says it's treason. He stands up and angrily yells that he will have no part of it, and Criston comes up behind him, rams him down, smashing his head into the table and killing him. And it reminds me of the goofy-ass death of Qyburn in Season 8 of Game of Thrones. I would do a compare and contrast, but I somehow doubt YouTube would take kindly to be putting up 2 deaths on their website, even if they are fictional. The Lord Commander of the Kingsguard is angry at Sir Criston and draws his sword. And if the Lord Commander's name's Westerling, why does he have a Scottish accent? And where was he and his sword last episode when Daemon killed someone intentionally in the throne room? But no, not a peep when poor old Will Johnson was getting killed. And talking about that, there was this cancer article in BuzzFeed that I found where people were gushing in admiration and some other ways at Daemon murdering that guy for his wife. There were people turned on by that. There were women saying that after they saw that scene, they had to go and change their underwear. Quite how far off the rails have we got in terms of morality when there are people lusting after a murderer? There do seem to be an unhealthy amount of women who are very turned on by the idea of a man who will commit violence on their behalf. And I'll just let that sink in. People saw Daemon kill a man for saying a pretty truthful insult about his niece wife, and they found it hot. So the council just carry on the meeting with poor dead Lord Beesbury just still sat there in his chair. And the Queen asks, what about Rhaenyra? And her father tries to lie to her face. He says the princess will be imprisoned. Made to swear an oath of loyalty to Aegon, but Alicent sees right through his lies. She knows that the council are plotting to kill Rhaenyra and Daemon, and Alicent will hear nothing of it. In retrospect, I'm not sure why Otto didn't try to have Rhaenyra killed decades ago. As soon as his daughter had a son with the king, that he wanted to be heir instead of Rhaenyra. Now, her death is the only way to avoid a war, and even then, she's married with kids now, so it may not end even with her death. It's not nice, but it is understandable from Otto's perspective. In universe though, none of this makes a lot of sense. Rhaenyra is clearly a better candidate than Aegon. Aegon is an unstable rapist. And why would anyone murder people in order to put him on the throne? He'd do a bad job, he doesn't even want the job, and he's a piece of shit. You're putting a rapist on the throne. Otto tries to send the Kingsguard to go and kill Rhaenyra and Daemon, and the leader of the Kingsguard refuses, saying that he only obeys the king and currently there isn't one. So he leaves after stepping down from the Kingsguard. Meanwhile, Aegon is missing and a race starts to find him. Whoever controls Aegon controls the throne, so Otto and Alicent both want him badly. Otto sends Sir Eric and his brother Aric to find Aegon while he does loyalty tests on the lords at King's Landing, wanting them to swear loyalty to Aegon instead of Rhaenyra. Several refuse and are led away to an uncertain fate. One man loyal to Rhaenyra pretends to bend the knee so he can later run and tell Rhaenyra what's happened, but he's stopped and arrested at the gate. Alicent sends Sir Criston to find Aegon, and Aegon's brother Aemond goes with him to look, as he claims to know where Aegon goes. He takes Criston to a brothel that Aegon once took him to, and Criston does not approve, saying, "Every woman is an image of the mother to be spoken of with reverence." And, sorry, I was just flashing back to Sir Criston a few episodes ago, calling Rhaenyra, what was it again? Let's say he called her a spoiled runt. That was episode 6, I think, so he's changed his tune a bit since then. A woman at the brothel tells them that Aegon hasn't been there in years, that his tastes are less discerning now, so Kristen and Aemond have got no idea where he is. Meanwhile, after some searching, Eric and Arik end up in a fighting arena that Aegon allegedly frequents, where they do a version of cockfighting with specially sharpened children. And yes, you heard that right the first time. Specially sharpened children. The proprietors of this fine establishment sharpen their teeth and nails and have them fight each other. And what is this scene even doing here? What's the point of any of this? What purpose does this serve in the plot? Just to show that Aegon is not a nice guy. Because I already got that from the rape. The children are 10 years old and they sharpen them to make them more formidable in the ring. But in truth, how formidable can you make a 10-year-old child? This is just gratuitous nonsense. There are good reasons why people do dog fighting instead of fighting children. Children get a lot more heat from authorities when they're made to fight to the death. 10-year-olds are not really fighters in the first place. A dog will be mature and ready to fight in a couple of years. So where are the children for this even coming from? Are they raising babies up to 10-year-olds just for this fight? Or are they just getting kids off of the street? Sadly, either way, I still don't think it works. Meanwhile, there's more sad music as the king's body is wrapped and Alicent sobs. Alicent then goes to Rhaenys and asks for her support, trying her best to convince her, and it's a pretty good scene. Alicent leaves, locking her in until she's made a decision. Meanwhile, Eric and Arik have a lead. In the arena, they're approached by a woman there on behalf of a mystery person called the White Worm, and they claim to have Aegon, but want an in-person meeting. Otto goes to see the White Worm, who says she can give Aegon to him for a price. And that reminds me of an interesting film. Did you ever see that movie? It's called The Lair of the White Worm. If you've never seen that film, it's a bit of a time capsule, and it holds up quite well for a relatively low budget horror flick. Like I say, it's a horror from 1988, starring a young Hugh Grant before he did 4 Weddings and a Funeral, and a young Peter Capaldi long before he was Doctor Who. It also had Amanda Donoghue being very sexy in it. And it also had a small role for the actor Paul Brook, who you may recognise as the Bantha Keeper in Jabba's palace in Return of the Jedi. That film brings back some good memories. Do you remember when films were interesting? When someone could make a piece of art without a committee of scolds coming along to make it anodyne and rubbish? Do you remember when people made films and just tried their best to make them good and entertaining? No? Can we go back to that? House the Dragon, episode 9. So in return for Aegon, the White Worm wants money and an end to the fighting ring involving sharpened children, and she tells Otto in a thick accent to remember that she could have killed Aegon as easily as a wasp on fruit. And that's a strange choice of phrase. So anyway, Otto pays her and promises to shut down the child fighting rings, and in return they are given Aegon's location, but unbeknownst to them, Kristen and Aemond are watching from the shadows. So Sirs Eric and Arik find Aegon unconscious under a table in the Grand Sept, and Aegon, when he wakes up, tries to run away. It turns out he doesn't even want to be king. As the three leave, they're confronted outside by Kristen and Aemond. Aegon tries to run away again and is chased down by his brother, while either Eric or Arik draws his sword. They're twins, you see, so I'm not actually sure which one it is that draws his sword. I think Eric hates Aegon after the things he's seen him do and doesn't want him to be king. So it's maybe Eric that stands by and does nothing. Well, I think it may be Arik that fights Kristen. But like I say, in truth, I'm not even sure. And it's time for the crappy fight scene. And who's going to win? Kristen or whichever of Eric or Arik this is? In truth, it doesn't make much difference because the show has essentially told us nothing about either of these characters, but at least, finally we get some action. So there are a couple of sword strikes and then the camera cuts away. And feck off, can I see the fight? Instead they cut away to show Aemond wrestling with Aegon on the floor. What the hell? Oh, thank God, we've cut back to the fight. And it's a bit pedestrian. They're like two teenage boys having an imaginary sword fight with sticks, but it's something. They move down the stairs after Sir Criston gets knocked over and he seems to be on the back foot. And the camera cuts away again to a couple of monks looking startled. Back off! Can I see the life and death struggle and not the concerned monks, please?
I was hoping you disappeared.
Then we get back to the fight and they cut away to the wrestling again. And they just keep on cutting away until somehow Criston disarms Eric or Arik or whichever one it is and wins.
Is our father truly dead?
Yes. And they're going to make you king.
Are you going to help me?
Show, you have to know what your money shot is. And here, it's the sword fight. If you have a nice, nudie Esme Bianco in the room, she's the money shot, not a nice, lacy doily on the table. And this is a frankly infuriating tease. I imagine this must be what it's like going to a cinema to watch a Sahara Night film and getting all excited to find that the cameraman kept on getting bored during the naughty stuff and instead kept on turning the focus instead on the glazed earthenware pottery on the mantelpiece. Maybe a nice commemorative coin. While in the background, Sahara is doing her best to try and make sexy noises. He's looking at the pattern on the carpeting and not even the interesting kind. I mean, the fights in Thrones were often bad. You had Jaime's duel with Ned Stark in season 1, which wasn't great. Sean Bean can do an okay fight scene, but he was maybe getting a bit old for that business at this point in his career, and neither him or Nikolai Coster-Waldau are expert swordsmen. Bronn's duel was good though, when he was fighting for Tyrion's life in the Eyrie. Why the fights in Hot D so much worse than the ones from Game of Thrones? So the upshot of the fight is that Alicent has the prince in her custody instead of her father, and this means that she gets to call the shots and can make sure the assassination of Rhaenyra and Daemon doesn't happen. So Otto is not going to get his way, and she leaves after he says how much she looks like her mother in some lights. And normally I'd just let that remark go. But after the uncle-niece wedding, I do not have any faith left in this show in that regard. So this comment just comes off as creepy to me. And like I say, the fight came without any build-up, because Eric and Arik have done nothing to show that they're adept warriors. To compare it to something that I think did a better job, take the film Shogun Assassin. Now, Shogun Assassin is a weird film from 1980. It's a movie cut together from a series of Japanese films based on a manga called The Lone Wolf and Cub. And they make major changes to the story to cut it down from 5 films to 1. Sadly, the film is so bloody I can practically show none of it on YouTube. But it does do a great job of building up the antagonists, the Masters of Death, by having them in numerous fight scenes to show their capabilities before they finally face the protagonist. And if the Masters of Death look a bit familiar, it's because they were allegedly the inspiration for the characters the Three Storms from the film Big Trouble in Little China. So if you've never watched either Big Trouble in Little China, Shogun Assassin or the Lone Wolf and Cub films, I'd recommend all of them probably more highly than I recommend House of the Dragon. I'm very fond of the dubbed version of Shogun Assassin because some of the dubbing is so funny it makes me laugh out loud every time. Like this.
I am the supreme ninja! Oh!
And it's hard not to notice that at the core of most of the in-universe problems of House of the Dragon are the female leads. The show tries to cast the female characters as victims of a patriarchal world, but they do get plenty of decisions between them, and everyone they make seemingly leads to disaster. It's like She-Hulk again. The message the makers say they wanted to send seems to oddly clash with the message they actually sent. By Alicent putting her son in as king and refusing to move against Rhaenyra and Daemon, Alicent has set the stage for war. There are signs in the show that she was the one who poisoned her children against Rhaenyra and her family. So Alicent goes back to her chambers and it's the creepy foot fetish scene. Alicent has been trading with Larys. He gives her information and in return she lets him look at her feet while he touches himself. And again, what is this doing here? What purpose does this scene serve to the narrative? It hardly gets Larys bad guy points, does it? Because it's nothing compared to the stuff he's already done. He burned his own father and brother to death. This could have been done without any of the foot fetish stuff at all. The only purpose I can see is to show a man degrading Alicent again and maybe for some cheap shock points. As far as I'm concerned, it certainly isn't here for the entertainment. Meanwhile, Sir Eric has decided to help Rhaenyra against the Greens and goes to break Rhaenys out of her room. At least I think it's Sir Eric. Because Eric and Eric are played by two twin brothers, and they're played by real-life twin brothers, Elliot and Luke Tittensaw. And they're from Lancashire in England, so that's nice. It looks like this is one of the first times they've ever been able to work together acting. As Eric and Rhaenys leave, they see that the noble who tried to run earlier has been hanged. I mean, if Sir Eric felt this strongly about Aegon, why leave him alive at all? He was his bodyguard. He could have killed him and run at any point. Eric and Rhaenys get split up while walking through the streets of King's Landing as the citizens are being pushed by the city guard into part of the city to witness the coronation of Aegon. I'm not sure where they're going for the coronation because the Sept of Baelor hasn't been built yet. There are 2 more kings to come after Aegon before Baelor is king and gets to build it. I had assumed they'd do the coronation in the Grand Sept where Aegon was hiding under a table earlier in the episode. They instead seem to be doing the coronation in the Dragon Pit. Surely the cathedral would be more normal. The Queen is very devout. Why the hell would they do it in the Dragon Pit? So Aegon is named as king, and Rhaenys in the crowd sneaks off and gets her dragon before bursting up through the floor of the Dragon Pit, killing God only knows how many civilians in a scene sadly reminiscent of Daenerys torching people in the streets in Season 8 of Game of Thrones. And I guess this is why they had to have the coronation here. I can think of not a single good in-universe reason. I think the writers just wanted this scene where Rhaenys was able to sneak off and get her dragon and burst through the floor. Rhaenys then has the opportunity to kill off the whole Greens faction and end the potential war right there, and she instead chooses not to. The episode ends with her riding off on her dragon. So that's it for episode 9. Only one more episode to go. Let's see if they can stick the landing.